Kia ora everybody and welcome back to Civilization 5. Today we're going to do something a little different and take a deep dive into citizen management and city management. But before you click away because you think it's boring, let me tell you that if you listen through this whole video and understand these fundamentals, you will win more games, you will have more food, more gold, more science, more of whatever you like in your cities. And really, actually, once you understand these tips and tricks and processes, you'll be so much better for it, and you'll wonder, how did I even not utilize these? So let's take a deep dive. You can see up the top left the metrics, what my empire is earning. Most of you are probably familiar with this, but if you're not, if you hover over it, you can see where my income is coming from, where my expenses are, and you can see that at the moment, this empire isn't actually doing particularly well. I've just come out the back of a war, I'm unhappy, I have very few trade routes, I'm losing gold per turn, I'm generating 102 science per turn, and a measly 2 faith. That's empire-wide. But if you click on an individual city, let's say this one here, which has a population size of 12, that's important, and is currently not growing. You'll see this little number up here on the second city, you can see it's going to grow in 16 turns. City growth occurs thanks to food. So, how much food is this city making, and why is it not growing? First up, I want you to head down to the bottom right, toggle map options, and I want you to turn yield icons on if you don't already have them on. It can also be helpful to turn on hex grid like I've done, or resource icons if you want to see where things like crabs and sugar are. I'm going to leave resource icons on, yield icons on, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to turn the hex grid off. You can leave it on if you want to. Now, this might look like a lot to unfamiliar players, and to familiar players, you'll be right at home, so I'm going to try and strike a balance here. If I turn the hex grid on temporarily, you can see how much each tile is producing. So this tile here with sugar is producing 3 gold per turn and 2 food. This tile here with no improvements, it's a grassland, hill and river, which you can see in the bottom right little tooltip above the map. It's producing 2 production only. Gold is obviously my gold, food enables growth, production enables faster construction of units and buildings. Okay, so you can see the tile of the city itself is producing a lot, right? We've got a big food basket. We can see 5 food, 1 production, and 6 gold. You can also see here that special tile improvements have their own unique yields. So I used a great scientist to build an academy on this tile, and now it produces 8 science per turn. However, there is a catch here. I'm not getting the benefit from all of these tiles because each tile requires 1 population to work. So at the moment, I have a population of 12. The city is size 12. That means I'm working 12 of these tiles. Which ones, you wonder? Well, click the city to head into the city interface. Then up here in the top right, you're going to see all of the different menus from the city. You can see buildings and what their benefits and drawbacks are. You can see great works. I'm going to close that one as well by hitting the little button here. You can see the wonders in the city. I'm going to close that too. What I'm really interested in is citizen management. Now we can see which tiles are being worked by my citizens. The game by default will of course be on default focus for managing citizens. But here you can manually change the focus of a city. So watch what happens when I swap from default to food. A citizen begins to work this tile in the top left. That's because I've instructed the city to prioritize food. Over here on the left, you can see the impacts. So when I swap to food, all of a sudden, the city is producing 1.8 food per turn. However, the production and gold have gone down slightly as citizens move from one tile to another. The yields change. At this point in the video, I would encourage you, if these any definitions or anything that I'm describing is a little confusing to you, I would encourage you to stop, go back to the start of the video, and listen through again. If you're fully up to speed with citizen management and you're feeling comfortable with where we're at, let's carry on. So, you also have the option, regardless of what focus you're putting the city on, to manually move citizens around. Let's say, for example, that I really like this tile, right? I really just like the fact that it produces 3 gold and 2 food. So I will look around and I'll say, actually, you know what? Maybe, in theory, this city is less interested in production. So I can click that tile, and now it's not being worked. I have 1 free citizen. You'll see here, unemployed citizens. There's 1. And now I can assign the citizen here. I've assigned them to this tile. They are locked on this tile. Because I've manually assigned them, they will now always work this tile, regardless of whether I shift the focuses around up here in the top left. I would recommend that you do this only when there's a really special case of a tile that you want to always be worked. This one probably isn't producing enough to warrant that. This tile, however, which produces a massive 8 science per turn, I want to always be worked, regardless of how the city is focusing, okay? So I'm going to lock a citizen onto that one. I'm going to say, so long as we have at least 1 person free, they will work this tile, okay? That's the fundamentals of city management and managing tiles and yields. So this city is stagnating. I want it to grow because the more it grows, the more citizens I get. And the more citizens that I get, the more tiles I can work. So it's really beneficial for me that this city grows. So I'm probably best to swap it onto a food focus. Swapping it to a food focus will enable me to gain more citizens. Now, that's the fundamentals of citizen management within the city. There is one other crucial element here that I'd like to show you. You can see your great people earning. That's not the critical element, but just a small side tip. But what I'm really interested in here is specialist buildings, okay? So specialist buildings are buildings that you've built within your city, and they are highly specialized, right? So you'll see the bank, a highly specialized building focused purely around producing gold. Same with the market. University, again, a specialized building that requires specialist workers. However, in this case, of course, its primary benefit is science. Workshop, same deal, but with production. Okay, so just like these tiles are worked when we're in the citizen management and we're determining which city tile we'd like to have worked, specialist buildings effectively have their own sort of quote-unquote tiles. What I mean by that is, you can see that citizens can be assigned to work these specialist buildings rather than tiles. So I've got 2 specialists working at the university, and each specialist is producing 3 science and 3 points towards a great scientist. The market specialists, merchants, are producing 2 gold and 3 points towards a great merchant. You can hover over these citizens to see how much they're producing. In general, and this will vary based on game and based on what victory condition you want to go for and all sorts of things, but in general, I would recommend that you have specialists in your science buildings as a priority. The market, the workshop, and other buildings that aren't science focused, you can sort of take them or leave them. Yes, they are useful. They are definitely useful, but they may not be your best use of citizens. You may find that there are tiles on the map, like for example this crabs, which is producing 3 food, 1 production and 1 gold, that's more beneficial than, say, having a specialist in the market producing 2 gold and some great person points that we don't really care about, right? These tiles are much more beneficial. We're going to grow much faster. So I'm going to manually control my specialists and put science specialists in, but for the time being, I'm going to leave the market and the bank without specialists. I'm not so much worried about -5 gold per turn. We'll make that up, particularly once we recover our happiness. I've just come out the back of a war, you know? But science is really important. I want to keep my science focus, but then I'm going to manually disable people from working these specialist buildings that don't really produce a great yield, and instead allow these citizens to work tiles instead, so I can get more food. So I'm going to switch the city to food focus. I've manually controlled my specialists. For me, focusing purely on the scientific ones. There are cases for, potentially the market and others, but for the time being, I'd recommend manually control, science only. And now that we've gone in, we've taken a deep dive into the city, we've managed our citizens, we've managed our specialists, you can see that the city is growing. And it's growing much quicker than it was, right? Before we were stagnating. So obviously it's quicker than that. But also, since I've twisted the specialist slightly, you can see we're now getting 3 food per turn, which for a starving city is pretty good. I could go even further in and say, actually, I don't want production at all. I'll turn that person off. I simply want as much food as possible, right? So I turn them off. I scan across. Let's see, where's the food? Where's the food? Well, I'll ditch 2 production and I'll take on 2 food. Now we're getting 4.2 food a turn, and it's only going to take 13 to grow. And so you can see if you continue to do that and you continue to manage your citizens well, you'll always end up producing exactly what you need. I would recommend, of course, that you focus on food and science, particularly food, because the more food you produce, the faster you will grow and the more citizens you'll have to work tiles and buildings. Thanks so much for joining me for today's Civ 5 tutorial. It's a really fundamentally important one. It's one that I covered a little bit in the first episode of this series, but I really felt like it deserved its own unique deep dive because a lot of players miss this stuff and it is fundamentally important, particularly in the earlier phases of the game when you're only managing a few cities and you really want to get growth going or science going or whatever it is you're working towards. Thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time, have a good one.